who we know from Harrow, thank you for being here. And the rest who we know from London and afar, even people from abroad, that's amazing. So this is the first time we're sort of presenting our work, which we started recently. It's on the Greek churches in London. The plan was to do the whole of the UK. That seemed a bit too big of a project for now. So we're aiming for London, and then probably second phase will be Thyateira Project 2, where we look at the rest of the churches, the Greek churches in the UK. Now, it's interesting to see how we have a great relationship, not only within the community, but between us and the Anglicans. That's my main focus. And how, for example, most of the churches we have are from the Anglican churches, which were sold to us. Here you see we've got University of Bristol, Heritage Lottery Fund, Alperton Community School, where I work. So we're going to give you a small insight of our work up to this point. So what is the Thyateira Project? So it aims to record the history, the buildings, tangible and intangible cultural heritage assets that are associated with the Orthodox communities, which run under the auspices, the aegis of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. We are being specific with our research. We're looking at this archdiocese, the Archdiocese of Thyateira in Great Britain. Instead of looking at all the Orthodox churches, we're not looking at Russian, Romanian, Serbian. Maybe that will be for Thyateira Project number 3 or another type of project like it, which we haven't got in the plans for now. But we see that at least this archdiocese has within its scope many people from different Orthodox countries. So it's not just a Greek thing. It is under the Ecumenical Patriarchate, which engulfs many traditions and countries. And we are looking for now at London and the Greater London area, which means that we're going to visit in total about 20-something churches. We are mainly focusing on, Konstantinos is going to speak mostly about this, about the buildings. We are looking at communities which have their own buildings. If a community is sharing a building with the Anglican local parish, we're not looking at them because we wanted the whole sort of community and parish building. But we will explain this later on. So why is the Thyateira Project important? The heritage is on great demand to be recorded because the older generations who funded these communities are fading and the buildings are undergoing renovations without recording most of the time. So this is a first attempt to record the history, the culture capital, and also look at the buildings, because if we don't record this now, we might never record it and we'll never see these changes. Objectives of Thyateira Project: we aim to use these recordings to create religious studies resources for mainstream schools and language resources for Greek-speaking minority and community schools. We've already started this project where I've worked with some of my students at Alperton Community School. We wish to conduct research with high school students from Brent on what is Orthodox in the UK. I'll show you the findings later on. To communicate the importance of the tangible and intangible assets to non-Orthodox communities, are willing to support the interfaith dialogues in the UK. So it's not just, as I said before, an Orthodox thing. We are looking at it from an interdenominational aspect. Create resources for second language acquisition and to praise and promote the British values on inclusion, tolerance, diversity, and equality. So all of these things come under this scope. I mean, this project is done within and under the guidance of the University of Bristol and Archbishop Community School. So it is institutions who do and examine British values. Why Thyateira Project? What does the name mean? So the city of Thyateira, after which the archdiocese was named, was one of the 7 apostolic churches. And up to its decadence and abandonment, it had been a prominent metropolis of the Christian world. It's interesting to see that, and I was doing a research recently about this. The first archdiocese in Western Europe was this one, which was first known as the metropolis of Thyateira in Great Britain. At the same time, we had the Archdiocese of America and Australia established by the Ecumenical Patriarchate, but they didn't receive a special name. a link to Asia Minor or a link to the Book of Revelations in the New Testament. It's interesting to see why we did here in the UK. And actually, of course, Adino doesn't know this. I'm saying this for the first time. I sent a letter to the Ecumenical Patriarchate to receive some guidance on the archives they have there to see why they chose this name and actually link with what we're doing. So when we find that, we will publicize that. I have an hypothesis here. Does this title link with an extract from Acts, the book of Acts in the New Testament, where we find Lydia, who was the first woman to be baptized in Europe by St. Paul, and she was from the city of Thyateira. So I'm thinking, is there a link there? Did the Ecumenical Patriarchate actually think about this and make the link? I might be wrong. It is academics, so you never know. It might be a right hypothesis. It might be a stupid hypothesis, but it is one nonetheless. The impact of the presence of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Thyateira in Great Britain in London to the Anglican Communion. So it doesn't only affect the Orthodox or the people who came from the East and established themselves here. It also affects the people they found. So we are the first Orthodox Archdiocese in Western Europe. Reason for this is the long-standing relations, the unofficial and official between the Orthodox Church and the Anglican Communion. We have had unofficial relations since the 17th century, official relations since the birth of the World Council of Churches in 1948 after World War II. And since then, we have had great relations, having up to now 4 official statements. We see a great friendliness between us. That's why this age, the 20th century onwards, is known as the age of ecumenism. It's the age where we are trying to come closer to each other, leaving behind us the past where we weren't friends because we were from different denominations. We had that enmity, but now we have this idea of friendship, of love, Christian love within our relationships. And this is evident actually through the existence and the flourishing of this Archdiocese of Thyateira in Great Britain in the UK. How, because of that assistance we received from the Anglican Communion, we have been able to have now, within this Archdiocese, 115 churches in the whole country. We also have, let us not forget, the Russians, the Romanian churches, the Serbian churches, the Antiochian churches. So nearly I think, I might be wrong here, but I think we nearly have 150 Orthodox churches in the country. So it is a great number to have. Now, part of our research is also to take pictures and look at the interior of the churches, as you can see here, from different Orthodox churches. Some of these were built by us, the Orthodox, only 2 in the UK and 1 chapel in London, sorry. The rest we have bought from the Anglicans. So how have we transformed them? How have we changed the interior, the exterior also, but the interior? Look at the icons. The fact that we do have icons in London, the same way we would find them in Eastern Europe. So the presence of the Orthodox Church in Great Britain has impacted Anglican thought, theology, and practices. Iconography is an ancient tradition from the time of the ancient church, retained today by many Christian denominations. So visiting ancient cathedrals in Great Britain, one can see the iconographic tradition and wealth which existed. We are not the only ones who have icons in the UK. These are some examples of iconography we find in Anglican cathedrals. Due to the Reformation, this tradition had changed, but here you see iconography from St. Albans, Winchester Cathedral, and other churches, where we see that this isn't a tradition that the Orthodox brought to the UK. It already existed. Let's not forget that there was a great relationship between the Christian faith in the UK with Egypt back in the 4th, 5th century, and then links with Rome. So we weren't the first ones who brought iconography here, but we have our own style to showcase. Interestingly enough, iconography was a key point for closing down the first Greek Orthodox Church in London. For those who don't know the story, this is an extract from the story. The former church of the Domitian of the Mother of God in Soho, founded in 1677, still stood. However, a few years after its opening, it was closed partly on the insistence of Henry Compton, Anglican Bishop of London, who had forbidden the Greeks to have icons there and who had asked that they disowned various of their beliefs. So it's interesting to see how, despite us having and showcasing iconography today, there were instances like this one where we were forced to close churches because of this tradition. But yet again, look at this. Since then, we see that iconography and Orthodox theology have become attractive to the Anglican audience. The big picture here is from Winchester Cathedral. The second one is from Cardiff, where we have a mosaic of Jesus Christ Pantocrator, which was blessed by the former Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury. So you see here how the theology of within Anglicanism, the understanding of iconography has changed. Is it due to the Orthodox? Yes, maybe. It is, I would say, looking at the relations from the 17th century onwards, it is due to the fact that we are now speaking, we are coming closer with our understanding. We might not accept everyone's, every theology that both denominations have, but at least we are accepting and understanding, and we see that actually iconography can be a common tradition between East and West. Not everywhere. I understand not everyone accepts this. I mean, we have statues in churches here in the UK. The Orthodox don't have statues, but we have iconography. But we see this relationship that is building between the two communities, especially in cathedrals. I mean, the Cardiff church here is not a cathedral, if I remember. It's just a parish church. So we see that it's expanding to like normal churches. The mixed methodology for this part of the project will be undertaken in two ways. I won't bore you with the details, but it's some key things that we are looking at with a generic questionnaire, which will be the same for all the churches, parishes we examine in order to create a statistical chart, and with interviews of key figures of each parish on specific important religious and historical events in the life of the local community. These interviews will be transcribed and used for a better understanding of each church. Actually, we have Christina here who is transcribing it for us, and we thank her for it. We're looking at qualitative research. For those who don't know, this is concerned with interpreting the subjective experience, such as the perspectives of the members of the churches, the history. So how does the individual understand the historical accounts? How do they understand the community? What does the community have, the relationship with the Anglican parish beforehand or the one that's around them? So looking at their own history through the history of the parish. And here are some indications of where we have actually visited churches, spoken, as you can see, mainly to priests, but not only priests. We have some lay people, we have some women, so it's not just male priests. And we are discussing these issues of the history, the traditions of each parish. And we actually can find the uniqueness of each parish, because they have a common feature that people from the East came here. But then what happened with their history? How did they build a church? How did they buy the church? How did they use iconography? Did they not? What do they have now? Do they, for example, have Greek school, which is a thing we find with many churches? Or you see what happens with converts. We have priests, we have Father Christian there who was converted to Orthodoxy, who born Orthodox. What was his journey? And so on. We see the School of Byzantine music through this. I mean, Father Joseph here showcasing the 30th anniversary of his parish was talking to us about the life of the School of Byzantine music. We also, during our time.
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you, yes. Yeah.
Oh, Irula, you're on.
Sorry.
Thank you. We're also using quantitative research. So this is based on numbers, it's based on statistical analysis. And a lot of this will be done not by myself. I'm mostly the culture capital. I'll leave this to Costadino to expand more on this. During our visits, we also were able to attend the divine liturgies and the vespers, as you can see here, 3 churches we've been to up to now where we have had that experience as a Thyateira Project, Vespers and a liturgy. And it's interesting to see the life, the living aspect of the church, the sacramental aspect of the church. And this is something that we will work with our photographer, Alexis Yanaris, who I'm gonna showcase in a second, of sort of the life of the community here in London. We are wishing to, of course, look at archival material, photos, in order to see the history and the evolution of the churches. So trying to understand the historical significance of the communities, examine the relationships between the Orthodox and the Anglicans. In many cases, we can see this greatly, especially when we see that the church has been bought by the Anglicans. How then has it transferred to and become an Orthodox church? Because we've only, as I've said before, we've only built 2 churches in London, St. Sophia and St. Panteleimon, and we've got the chapel, the Archdiocese chapel, which was built by the Orthodox. The rest have been bought. What does that mean about the relationships, the relations between the 2 communities? Exploring the religious and social history of the Greek Orthodox in London through the life of the communities of the Archdiocese of Thyateira and Great Britain. And here, actually, I'm showcasing you some archival pictures we found from All Saints. These are, I think, one of the most significant ones we could find. Many would know Makarios, the president of Cyprus, who he came here before the invasion in the 50s. He also came just after the Turkish invasion and occupation of Cyprus, and he came to All Saints in Camden Town. So there's a great link between the Camden Town Church and the sort of the history of the Church of Cyprus and of Cyprus. We see previous archbishops, the inauguration of the church, the blessing of the church when it was constructed again, the bell tower. Here we have another type of history, another type of story where we've got a building of a church in Harrow, how it was before as an Anglican church, and then it was built into a Byzantine church. We also have the dominance of the school, Bouzouki lessons, and other activities. So it's not just, we're not only looking at the religious aspect, we are also looking at the culture, the education, the parish identity, which changes from church to church, dynamic, different needs, different people who work in these parishes. We are, of course, this is where I'm showcasing now Alexis Yanaris, who is here with us. We are working with Alexis Yanaris, who has given us permission to use many of his pictures. He is the photographer of Thyateira here, taking amazing pictures, as you can see here in front of you. And so we want to show that we're not talking about bricks. We're not talking about dead communities. We are talking about living history. We are talking about a church which is actually thriving. It's increasing in numbers, where we find that Anglican churches are closing down. We are opening churches. So we are increasing in numbers. We are increasing as a potential. Our ISIS is growing. And so we need to showcase the people. So Alexis Yanaris is working with us on this. And as you can see here, he's got a picture with the mask to show, actually, he might not like this picture. I'm not sure if he does, but I thought it was interesting because it shows that despite the pandemic and the difficulties of going to church, we are allowed to now, during lockdown 2 or 3, to go to church and take pictures and partake of the sacraments. So I thought it's symbolically important to show that. Part of our project is to work with high school students in London on what is Orthodox in the UK. I did this in my school, where I had 2 year 10 classes, and our objectives was the creation and teaching of educational resources on what is research. I taught them first what is research, time management, and then I introduced them to the Orthodox Church, making links with the UK, not an abstract notion of Orthodoxy in Russia, Romania, Greece, Serbia. No, here, how do I have Orthodoxy in the UK? So the students researched an Orthodox community in London. They had to pick one, looked at church buildings, history, current life of the community, and Orthodox theology. And they had to, the majority created PowerPoint presentations, which then they thankfully presented in class. And that was a nice experience for them, for the first time. They hadn't presented something like this, especially in religious studies. They had to look for the church building, the community, what style of building it is. Is it an Anglican looking one? Is it an Eastern sort of Byzantine looking one? Do they have a language school? Have they interacted with other Christian denominations? We can see this through the history. What interesting features did they find that they found interesting? Because the majority of my students are actually non-Christians. They are Muslims and Hindu. So how would they see this notion of a Christian minority church in the UK? I think that was an interesting notion to share with my students. These are some things they had to look for. I showed them this and I said, you are working on this. I gave them about 2 lessons to be creative in class, and any questions they had, they could ask me. We looked at sites, we looked at different churches. Many got confused and they were looking at churches abroad, but then I brought them back to, no, we're talking about the UK. How do I find this minority church in the UK? These are some results from before they undertook the research. I asked them a number of things. Whether they've been part of a research before, the majority said no. Have you heard of the Orthodox Church? Now, the majority said yes, because I teach them. And so I do talk about the Orthodox Church at points. So when I talk about the Anglicans, the Catholics, I also refer to the Orthodox. So they had heard them before. Did you know that there are Orthodox people living in London? Many, 43% said no. So despite them sort of knowing about the Orthodox Church, many didn't know them. And you see the majority of the ethnic background is Asian British. So and Muslims and Black African Caribbean. So my students who are not Christian try to understand how we have this church now in the UK. Some of their projects, which I'm sure you'll find some are funny and some are interesting. These are just some extracts from their work where they had to showcase each church. You see they've picked St. Sophia, All Saints, St. Andrews, the Golders Green Church, Dormition of the Mother of God, Wood Green. And they had to sort of, this is just the first page of each PowerPoint, where they could be as creative as they wanted to then give the class the details for each parish. And the results after the research, where we see what did they gain from this research? What did they understand? Whether they enjoyed it. So we see there at the bottom right that they did. Will you use the research methodologies you learned here in the future? Many said yes, maybe said maybe. So again, it wasn't only, the focus wasn't only to teach them about the Orthodox Church, it was also to give them some research methodologies so they can progress. And methodologies that they would use also for any coursework they have in later years in GCSE or A levels. So this part of the research is focused on engaging with the Greek Orthodox communities, mainly the leaders and a number of representatives. So we can't, of course, interview everyone, but we try and interview as many people as we can. Educational engagement within the communities, but also in our own institutions, creation of resources, which we are aiming to do, qualitative and quantitative research. That is me done. That's the first part of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed that bit. This is the sort of my aspect of the culture capital and understanding the people rather than the buildings. Kostas now will explain his part of the research. This is again an introduction to what the Thyateira Project is. So when we eventually do roadshows and events at a local level in parishes, we aim to see as many people as we can. And it'll be great to see you lot live there and discuss this further. Thank you very much. Kostadine, yours. You're on mute, Kostadine.
I know that I'm in mute. No, I'm not. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
First of all, thanks a lot, Dimitri. So Dimitris was gave you a good introduction on why and what the purpose of our project. As I said to you before, I was mainly going to talk to you about how we do this project and how we extract this kind of information. I know that Dimitris already talked to you about the interviews that we're conducting by people from the communities. But let's see how we bring all these different strands of evidence together. Disclaimer here, this is work in progress. And I may not be able to answer lots of your questions. And we may be leading to kind of very generalized ideas. Second disclaimer, I know that the project is, as Dimitri said, generally under every Orthodox community, Christian Orthodox community that operates under the Archdiocese of Thyateira in Great Britain. But for this presentation today, and because we are at that stage in the project so far, I will talk to you mainly about the ethnic Greeks, communities that they're being established and mainly operated by the ethnic Greeks. And when I'm saying ethnic Greeks, I mean Greeks from the mainland and Greeks from Cyprus. So on my turn, special thanks to Alperton Community School and Red River Archaeology, which is our commercial partner in the building recording, and of course, the Heritage Lottery Fund, who supports the project. If you have any particular questions regarding building recording, regarding the buildings and the materiality of the project, please feel free to email me at costas.trimis@bristol.ac.uk. Now, what is all about? Why we're not just conducting interviews and archival research, and why we should care about the buildings and everything that comes with a building. So, thinking that the Thyateira Archdiocese and the communities are diasporic communities, and this is pretty much for the 99.9% of the people that they are part of these communities. We have some converts, but the majority of the people, doesn't matter if they're Greeks, Greek-Cypriots, or Romanians, they're mainly part of the community of a diaspora. Again, the biggest percentage is it's a Greek diaspora, ethnic Greek diaspora, but is also the other kind of Orthodox groups from the East. So it's a relatively modern approach to study diasporas, not via just interviews and history and archives, but also through their material culture, through their objects, their buildings, and all this tangible stuff that communities are creating and leaving behind. Now, if you don't know that so far, I'm an archaeologist and I'm working in the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology in Bristol. So I'm really interested on the tangible aspect, on the material culture, as we said. And also Christina Marini, who works with us as a partner, is also a material culture specialist and helps with the recording. Now, the main aspect of the project is the main kind of material culture that we are looking to record is the church buildings. We could have recorded other things. We could have recorded objects that Greeks have brought from Greece. I mean, let me think of an example. I have this lovely Kyknos can here. Okay, so this is a very, very Greek object, and we could have, there's even a book published in the 1970s, The Small Things Forgotten, which actually talks about this everyday culture. So there was many different things that we can record. We decide to record the buildings and what comes with them. This is not the first time that this is happening. It's the first time that it is happening worldwide when it comes down to record the church buildings. There's nothing similar in the Australia, nothing similar in the Americas or Canada. Talking with people from Melbourne and Chicago and New York, it seems that we're leading the way on how we should record the material culture of the Greek Orthodox diaspora. Now, mainly in Australia, but also in the United States, there are some early attempts to record the materiality of the diaspora. What are the objects that Greeks, ethnic Greeks, were taking with them as they're moving, immigrating to Australia or the USA? Now, it's a bit easy when you talk about Australia, because Greeks moved to Australia, they established a community there, but in reality, there is not, if you accept the Native American or the Native Australian, the old term was Aboriginals, it's not politically correct to use it anymore. So it's easier if you try to record the heritage and the material culture of a community that it's not a previous heritage there. Makes sense? There is no previous archaeology to an extent in Australia except the native Australians. Everybody migrated there. It's a new world. With the old world diasporas, as the British diaspora is, when Greeks, ethnic Greeks moved into Britain, they found an established community with their own beliefs, their own material culture, their own buildings. They have their churches here. It's not like we're going somewhere and we're building a church from scratch. And in our project, we would like to see how our heritage, the heritage of the Eastern Orthodoxy that we brought into Britain, actually affected the British, affected us, but also affected the homeland. And what is these amalgamated features? And when I'm talking about amalgamated features, see this this is from Holy Cross in Palmer's Green. It's the old Anglican altar, which still survives and has been kept. And on top of that, you have a Virgin Mary, a completely Neo-Byzantine Virgin Mary being painted. So you see how this is this amalgamated characteristic that we're looking really how it is happened. Now, a brief history, one slide history of the ethnic Greeks in London. We're an old community here. Actually, we can trace this back to the early Roman times. Of course, the Mycenaeans had a contact with Cornwall. They used to take tin for their bronze. So Eastern Mediterranean, Greece and Cyprus, with the UK, with Britain, they had a very long history of interaction that can be traced, I don't know, for at least 3,000 years. There was a very good, strong Greek community in London in the 4th century. We have some names surviving, like Demetrius, which was a merchant in late Roman London. But what we're looking now, it's the organized Greek communities that came in Britain really after the 16th century. Of course, you may know some of these names. George Constantinos from Skopelos is the most famous one because he opened the first cafe in London, in just off Strand at the modern-day Davero Court, the Grecian Cafe, where Newton used to go and drink his coffee and writing his Principia Mathematica. The Grecian Cafe, it was really famous. But for our project, the first really diasporic ethnic Greek Orthodox communities in London comes with the Greek merchants arriving in London in the 17th century. Because I mean, you all know about the Industrial Revolution in Britain. Greeks, very renowned merchants back in the day and sailors, they found a job opportunity here that these guys up there, they are producing coal and iron, and we have the ships to transfer this stuff around the world. So they came and established the first maritime offices in London and also in Cardiff later on in the mid-19th century. So Dimitris talked to you about the early chapel in Soho. The second attempt for a Greek church in London, it was in Finsbury Circus in the 1837, which was a very, it's very interesting because around Finsbury Circus, there was all the Greek maritime offices. All the Greek merchants was around Finsbury Circus in the city, and kind of a Greek chapel was being built there. Unfortunately, and this is we don't have any actual kind of images or archival material about this Finsbury Circus chapel. And I'm looking in old OS maps, trying to find the location of this chapel. So if you have any possible information, please drop me a mail, because this is part of our research to find out where this Finsbury Circus chapel was. Next one is a small church established in London Wall in 1850s. We have a couple of archival images here from Getty so to show this church. We know the location about this church, and this is good. And of course, we have St. Sophia in Bayswater, established in 1879, the modern day cathedral. And then we have the expansion of the Greek communities from there onwards. So today in London, there is at least 24 Orthodox church buildings. Not all of them belong to ethnic Greeks, but is part of our project. 3 out of the 24 are purpose-built by ethnic Greek communities. Of course, St. Sophia Church in Bayswater, the St. Panteleimon Church in Harrow, the most recent purpose-built Greek Orthodox Church in London, and the little chapel of the Archdiocese offices in Paddington. The other 21 buildings are converted Western denomination buildings, and this is where our story starts. This is the main target of our research, to see how we acquired these buildings, how our communities has been structured around these buildings, and how we use this space and we interact with the space. And how we do that? We follow a building biography approach. We record the building, we record the skevi, the material that it comes with the building, like the templon, the altars, the pulpits, the icons, everything. And then we dress this with the human experience. That's why where the interviews comes in, the stories, the archival material comes in to connect really the building recording, the material culture recording with the people perceptions, the active perceptions people have about the history of these buildings. And for like a minute of archaeological theory here, all this is based on an Ingalls perception about taskscapes, like landscapes that we interact with them. And a church is also a landmark, but is also an enclosed landscape. Things, tasks are happening inside the church as well. Now, we are really halfway through the recording and we haven't really analyzed the interviews, so I don't have a lot of things to tell you, but I do have some preliminary observations that I would like to share with you. First of all, the main conversion we do to an Anglican building in order to serve as an Orthodox church is the erection of an iconostasis or a templon. And most of the templa in London is being transferred, is being bought in Greece, from Greece or from Cyprus, and it's been bought, transferred all the way to the UK. And this is a huge effort. Apparently in London, we have some, because of the templa in London are custom built, we have some of the most beautiful post-1970s templa in Orthodox Church. Look at this fantastic one in Camden, St. Andrew in Kentish Town, but also we have different perception of how we should erect a templon, as this one in St. Catherine's in Barnet, and of course this little bit more simple one from St. Barnabas at Goodgreen. Most of these templa is been erected at the late 70s, early 80s, is at the point where mainly Greek Cypriots had established their communities in London, and they starting opening up churches, and they converting old Anglican buildings. Now, another main point, another main difference is that the Orthodox altar is freestanding at the Aeron and not pushed over the back wall as it is happening in the most of Western denomination churches, mainly the Anglican churches. Catholic churches are different. Now, it's interesting that in a lot of the occasions, Greek Orthodox communities, they just use the Western denomination altars. They just pushing the altars forward, so they become freestanding in the middle of the Aeron, and then they following the typicon from there. And this is the two more fabulous Western altars that has been like literally moved forward to be used for Orthodox kind of typicon. This fantastic one from, this fantastic one from St. Andrews in Kentish Town, and St. Honorary at Gospel Oak. And talking to Father Christian in St. Andrews, and also Father Christodoulos in Gospel Oak, they were actually really praising the Western art that these altars has been decorated with. So the third main aspect is the iconography. And Dimitris talked to you all about the relationship, this strange relationship we have with the Western denominations when it comes down to iconography. Our typicon actually requires the presence of the icons in order to be communicated with the divine. So in Orthodox Byzantine style, it starts coming to the UK through the Orthodox buildings here. And it's very interesting, if you look at the official Historic England's records for St. Andrews and St. Sophia in Bayswater, you will see that a reason for their listing is that they're exemplary, they're exemplary for the Neo-Byzantine art. It's really, I mean, and this is continues today. We keep continuing decorating our churches. It's always a case. Post 1909, Eastern denomination churches, they follow a certain way of decoration. You have the Pantocrator on the trullos, you have the Platitera at the Aeron, and then you have, the evangelists in the four toxa of the trullos, spherica trigona, if you remember your Byzantine architecture. I had to tell you, I was awful in Byzantine architecture in the university. Anyway, so we have our buildings is been created to a way to be decorated. So the way that we transform our iconographic narrative to fit the architecture of a neo-Gothic building is a whole big discussion. I'm pretty sure a PhD can come out of this. A PhD on architecture, it can be really based on how Eastern Orthodox iconography is transformed in order to fit the architectural elements of a neo-Gothic Western denomination church. And here is an example from Edmonton, where they are decorating the church right now, and you will see how they actually built the iconographic narrative to fit the apsis of the neo-Gothic church. A couple of other examples of what I was talking to you about, St. John the Baptist at Hornsey and 12 Apostles in Herefordshire, where Eastern art is actually being modified to fit architectural elements of a Western building. Wood grain, of course, there's not only wall paintings or frescoes, there's also icons, as is Sir Barnabas, or this fantastic mosaic from wood grain, Holy Cross Palmer's grain again. And finally, the final thing that we have noticed and recording is that Greeks really incorporating the existing heritage into their typicon. As I said about the altars before, if there's something that we can use, we'll use it. We'll incorporate it. Doesn't matter if it's an aspect of another denomination. And this is fantastic. This is from a chapel in Palmer's Green, the St. Thecla's Chapel. But pulpits, statues, wall paintings, Western art iconography. You saw the altar before from St. Andrew's. Statues, pews remain in use unmodified. And this is wonderful on the way that we incorporate the Western typicon. Also, aspects of the history of the buildings, old inscriptions, old baptisteria, is also being preserved and respected by the new users of the building. So we respect all the Western denomination heritage that we actually have acquired once we acquired the building. A couple of examples, you'll see this fantastic combination of a Virgin Mary statue and Lavaron in Palmer's Green, this little shrine in Palmer's Green, a very good example as well. Like stained glass windows, we don't have a stained glass tradition in the East. Okay, this is a Western thing, but we incorporate it and we celebrate it. And as I said, all description, tombstones that they are in the churches is being completely incorporated and celebrated, which is interesting. You see the organ in St. Catherine's in Barnet. So this is incredible, having an organ, which is I mean, I grew up in a little Greek island. I've seen organ first in 2009 when I was traveling to Canterbury. I didn't know about the existence of the organ. And you move into a Greek Orthodox church, and because the organ is there, you come close with a Western tradition. And this has been incorporated into the Eastern practice. Now, so these are the main three things four things that are standing out today. Dimitri suggests that our iconography and our typicon is starting to an extent have an impact on the Anglican denomination, and he showed you the image from Winchester. We have elements that these amalgamated Greco-Western kind of Orthodox culture reflects to Greece as well, particularly if you see the first necrotaphio in Athens, the first cemetery in Athens, which really copies the Victorian cemeteries, particularly West Norwood, which was the Greek one. But all this is still in progress. We still have about 10 buildings to finish recording, and we still have to incorporate all the qualitative information we have gathered. So what's from now on? We would like to complete the building biographies of the Orthodox churches in London. We would like to produce some georeferenced resources. So we're looking forward to have a map where you could see all the Greek buildings, archdiocese buildings in London, and you could click on the map and you see photos of the building and all the information and the information of the community. This is one of the main deliverables of our project. We would like to understand better the relationship that the Orthodox have with other denomination and religious communities in London. As Dimitri said, we're about to produce heritage-based teaching resources for Greek schools in the UK. And after all, who would like to understand better this multicultural society that we all live in, and see how we interact with other people. Finally, and today's event was part of it, we would like to publicize our project outputs, and in reality to communicate those not only with the Greeks, but also with the rest. And to establish a protocol how the heritage of the diaspora should be studied in every aspect, from material culture to oral microhistories. And as Seferis said, our work is, our words are children of many people. It's not just me and Dimitris working in that. We have a generous support of the National Lottery Heritage Fund to record the churches in London, and we aim to apply for more funding to cover the rest of the UK. My department gives me time to do this and resources, and I have wonderful colleagues there who support me and teaches me a lot how to do things. I think my boss is here today, Stuart Pryor. So if you fancy any time studying archaeology and anthropology, Bristol should be your point of contact. Alperton Community School supports the project. Red River Archaeology is our commercial partner for the building recording. The Archdiocese gives us any possible support, and we thank them all. Dr. Christina Marini and Mirto Kokalia, an MPhil student from Oxford, they're helping massively with the recording, transcribing the interviews, doing catalogs, doing admin. Particularly without Christina, we would be severely behind in everything. Petros Alexopoulos helped us with photos. He came with us and took some pictures from our research. And Konstantina Kalogirou, it's a moral support, but also an educational support when it comes down to producing teaching resources for language learning. From Red River, Rachel Morgan and Vex Hughes is actually supporting us on the building recording. And finally, we would like to thank all of clergy and community members that have shared stories, pictures, archives with us so far. That was all from me. I think we overran about 10 minutes, both of us in total, but please excuse us. I've seen quite a lot of questions actually in the chat.
Maybe you can add, I sort of answered the question of why have we chosen to exclude church sharing arrangements? I gave an answer, but maybe you want to give a bit more. I know this is your field more than mine.
Church sharing. We would like to, I cannot find the question, sorry, but we had to put a baseline really. And it was a big discussion of church sharing, communities that they're renting churches or they're using churches. In reality, in the history of the Greek communities in Britain, this should have been incorporated, but we're not trying to rewrite the history of the Greek communities in Britain. We're trying to see communities that they come as a package with a building, sometimes a school, a hall, a certain kind of organization. It's a nucleus of what we're doing here. It's a community that doesn't own a building. It's very difficult to be recorded at the moment because the impact that it has to that building, it's to an extent shared, and sometimes probably are not allowed, like the erection of a temple. So if we're doing a history of Greeks in Britain, of Orthodox in Britain, then that would maybe be the choice. But more of doing kind of communities that owns a building and they have established here and they comes through their material culture with an interaction with the host land. Make sense? Any other questions?
If we have questions, you can ask now. We're willing and happy to answer. Until people think of questions, it's nice to see we have Father Milun and Father Stefan here who are from the Serbian Orthodox Church. Thank you for being here, fathers, your blessings. It's good to see that more Orthodox are joining this project and sort of seeing our work. It's not just, as I say all the time, it's not just the Greek thing. It's the Orthodox thing, and we're trying to promote that. We picked one archdiocese, but you never know, maybe we'll venture out to more in the future. We're willing to work, so we'll see. Do we have any questions? Irula.
I was just interested in what, do you know what happened to the little church in Soho? Was it knocked down, or was it converted into something else? Do you know?
You know, it was in Greek Street in Soho. It's no longer there, from what I remember. I don't think the church building is there, but the remnant of that church was the renaming of that street to Greek Street because it was the first Greek church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Kyrie Nagnostopoulou.
Hi. First of all, I must congratulate you on this excellent work, and I think it's a very good initiative. And it's good to have two professional, you two guys, work on this, and plus all your researchers and other colleagues. My question is, would all this, your findings, will there be a kind of online platform available that people will see? As you said, it's work in progress as things come out.